Hi there, and welcome to my studio. As many of you know, I love to silk screen on clay with underglazes. And I do that with a few different screens. But today I'm going to show you this crazy easy way to make this simple silk screen. You can make in minutes, prints great on newsprint, prints great on clay. All you need are these simple materials, and I'm going to show you how. As some of you may know, I do use a couple of different kinds of screens when I silk screen on clay. Two of my go-to screens are Easy Screen and Ikon Art Stencil Screen. Don't worry about writing it down. I'll put the links below, but don't forget, if you put clay printing when you check out, you'll get 15% off of either one that you choose. What's the difference? This develops 1 minute in the sun, and this develops 35 seconds under a UV speedball light. I love them both. I love them for different reasons. If you're interested in them, I have posted some videos and I'll be posting more. You can go to their site. That's how I learned. They have great instructional videos. But today, let's say you don't want to do any light sensitive emulsion. Let's say you just want to go to the craft store and make your screens. This is how you're going to do it. These screens work so great and they're so easy to make out of heat transfer vinyl and organza fabric. And they have now been one of my go-to screens along with the others. These are the materials that you need. The first thing that you need is heat transfer vinyl. It'll say on the wrapper HTV, and sometimes it will have a picture of an iron on it. You want to make sure you get the heat transfer vinyl HTV. There are many different brands. I've used different brands. I think they all work great. This is one that I found easy for me. It's called Sizer Easy Weed. You can get it at a lot of the hobby stores, Michael's, Joann's, places like that, or you can get it off of Amazon. The next thing that you're going to need is your fabric. I use a couple of different fabrics. I never use silk screen like you would buy to stretch a real silk screen. What I buy is organza fabric from the fabric stores. We have a Joann's in our area. That's where I get it. It's where the dressy fabrics are. It's very transparent, and there's a couple of different kinds. So watch, there is one that has kind of this sparkly stuff with it. I would probably steer away from that. But the one that I bought does have a little bit of a sheen to it. If you're not sure, buy like the smallest amount, like 1/8 of a yard, and test it out and make sure. I've never had an issue until one workshop and the stuff wanted to melt under the iron. So that was the only time that I've had that happen. Usually all the kind that I bought has worked, but it was enough to make me think twice and encourage you to iron a little bit of it before you get started. The other fabric I've been using, I bought at Hobby Lobby, and you can probably get it at any fabric store. It is sheer curtain material, and it also has worked very well. You do want to stick with a synthetic. You don't want to go with a silk. I thought like, oh, I need to ratchet it up a notch. I need to use some real silk, like a real silk screen would use. No, you don't want to do that, because this stuff is meant, the heat transfer vinyl is meant to iron on to a synthetic t-shirt fabric. So this cheap loves this cheap, and they work great together. The other thing that you'll need is something to keep that synthetic fabric away from that hot iron. So you can use this, which is a Teflon sheet. I bought this at Amazon, and they're very inexpensive. The other thing I've used is parchment paper from the grocery store. This works great. You will also need an X-Acto knife and or a pair of scissors. You'll see that in the video, and you'll see why you need one over the other, depending on what you're going to do, and a black Sharpie marker. The other thing that you'll need is an iron. I love this Black & Decker iron. I bought it for so cheap. It's really heavy, and you need a hot, dry iron. And I'm starting to love this thing. I've spent a lot of money on irons, but I don't know, maybe it's a retro look. I love it. Now, let's put everything together and make our silk screen. I'm going to show you some different ways that you can cut the HTV vinyl. This is one of the ways that I cut it. I use my computer, and I have a Cameo Silhouette die cut machine. They make a few different brands. I like this one because when I bought it, I could import any kind of drawings that I made, or I could draw shapes, or I could use stock images that they had and then send it to my cutter and cut the vinyl. After I take it off the machine, I can then cut my patterns apart, and then I'm going to weed it, which is basically pulling out everything that I want to print. Now my stencil is ready to fuse to the fabric. You have two sides to the HTV vinyl. One side is shiny, that's a clear acrylic layer that will be removed later, and the dull side, which is the actual vinyl that needs to be fused to the fabric. Put the vinyl side down toward the fabric and sandwich it between two pieces of parchment paper. Use a hot iron to firmly press to fuse your vinyl to the fabric. Once the vinyl is securely sealed to the fabric, you will be able to peel off the acrylic layer. You want to do this while it's still warm. After you've removed the acrylic backing, now place your silkscreen back between two sheets of parchment paper and give it one more press to make sure that it's firmly attached to the fabric. Now that you have all your silk screens fused to the fabric, you're ready to go to the last step, which is to apply some tape around the edges. You need to do this because otherwise they're a little too flimsy to use. They'll still be flexible enough to wrap around a pot while it's on the wheel or to silkscreen with, but the tape gives it a little added stability like the frame around a silkscreen. This is one of the ways that you can make your screens. Now let's look at another. The supplies you'll need is an X-Acto knife, a pair of scissors, a Sharpie marker, and of course your heat transfer vinyl. This way we're going to draw out our own design. This is great if you don't have a die cut machine or you want a more personalized look to the silk screen that you're going to make. I love these silk screens because they're not as slick and commercial as the one that I just did. The first step is to make sure that you're going to draw on the correct side, which is the matte side, because remember The shiny side is that clear acrylic layer that's going to come off later. I'm going to take my Sharpie marker and I'm going to draw the design that I want to silkscreen later. I think it's best if you take your time to color in everything you want to print. This will make it much easier when you go to cut and make your silkscreen, because you think you'll remember what's going to print, but you don't always remember what's going to print. So color it in knowing that that's what's going to print when you silkscreen your image. Use an X-Acto knife to cut out the shapes that you colored in, because remember, everything that you remove is what's going to print on your silkscreen. Your goal is to cut through the vinyl but not the acrylic backing. Will you make a mistake? Maybe. If you cut through the acrylic backing, don't worry about it. You can figure it out as you go. It's not going to hurt if you cut through the acrylic backing, but as you start to do it, you'll get a feel for how much you need to cut. So as you're cutting, remember, you want to cut the vinyl and remove the vinyl, and ideally leave the acrylic backing. Once you're done cutting, take a sheet of colored paper and slide it behind it, and you'll easily see what's going to actually print when you make your silkscreen. Now you're going to do the same thing that you did before. Vinyl side toward the fabric, sandwich it between pieces of parchment paper, and iron it with a hot, dry iron. Often people will ask, how do I know if I've ironed it enough? You will know because that acrylic backing will easily come off. If the vinyl is not stuck to the fabric, you haven't ironed enough, just put it back and re-iron it. Also, don't forget to do this second ironing. This is what really fuses that heat transfer vinyl to the fabric. Now, just add some tape and you'll be ready to silkscreen. Let's say you don't want to use an X-Acto knife, or you're working with young children that you don't want them to use an X-Acto knife. This is another way that you can create a silkscreen. And at first when I did it this way, I wasn't hoping for such great results. And then after I did it, I'm like, there's parts of this I really do like. So what I'm going to do this time is just take the vinyl and start chopping it up into shapes. I wouldn't overthink it. I just make some strips or squares or triangles. And what you want to do is just cut up your shapes, and then you can arrange them. Now that I have all my shapes cut, I'm going to put a piece of parchment paper down, and then I'm going to put my fabric down, and then I'm going to start laying out my pieces. Remember, matte side down, because that's the vinyl side you want to attach to the fabric. When you're arranging your shapes this way, it's going to be kind of like thinking backwards, because you have to remember that these shapes that you're putting down are not the shapes that are going to print. What is actually going to print is what is around the shapes. Once I had all the pieces fused on, I had to remind myself that it is the areas that are going to print, not the shapes. And I had some pretty large areas that I didn't think would be so interesting. And if that happens to you, just cut a few more shapes, even after you've put the tape on, and fill in those gaps. Now I'm ready to print. I usually print on a moist slab. I find it really doesn't matter which side you put your stencil down, and I'm using Amico Velvet Underglaze inks. It's a thickened velvet underglaze that works great printing on moist clay or leather hard clay, and it's very easy to change your colors. So I tend to overlap my prints, and a lot of times I will mix the colors so that I get this wide variety of colors. Look at how many colors I got, just only using 2 different colors of velvet underglaze. I love it. Once I've printed on the surface, I'm going to protect it with a piece of plastic wrap. I can do this immediately after I print, or I can wait a little while. And I'm going to put it on the front and the back. That way I can encase the clay in 2 sheets of plastic, and it will stay completely moist until I'm ready to build something with it. I love printing on clay, and these prints have Teacher's Palette Light, a translucent glaze over them, which I think is beautiful. Fired to 05. I mean, how easy is that? Don't forget, you can even make really simple shapes. Don't think you have to get real fancy dance. You can cut squares or circles or rectangles. These work great for silk screening onto clay and putting a nice even coat of underglaze on clay. And I'll be posting some videos about that another day. But now that you've got your silk screens made, you go silk screen onto clay. And if you don't know how to make the inks, there's another video that show you how. But I've got to tell you, Amico just came out with some inks, and they are fabulous. And in my next video, I'm going to show you the colors, and I'm going to show you how to use them. It's great. See you next time.